Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Molly Hardy, a program officer in the Division of Preservation and Access. I'm here with my colleague, Tatiana Asuma, from the Office of Challenge Grants. As you likely know, the NEH is located in Washington, D.C., near the United States Capitol, and is surrounded by just over a dozen tribal nations that live along the Anacostia and Potomac River watersheds, Chesapeake Bay area, and the state of Maryland, Virginia, and Delaware. We acknowledge that this land sits on the ancestral homelands of the Anacostans and the neighboring Piscataway and Pamunkey peoples. This presentation is designed to introduce you to the NEH and to the grant opportunities we have available to you. Here's a rundown of what we'll cover today. I will start by giving a quick introduction to the NEH. Then we provide an overview of the grants we offer that relate to libraries and archives. We'll share some examples of successful grants, and we'll end by showing you where you can learn more and how to apply for these awards. You can pose questions in the Q&A box at any time. Your question might be answered right away, or if there's something we think would benefit the whole group, we'll save it for the Q&A period at the end. If you would like to turn on the closed captioning, you can do so with the CC button at the bottom of your screen. I also want to alert you some handouts we have for you. They are available on the virtual grants workshop page, which may also be where you clicked the link to join this very meeting. If you scroll down to today's meetings, you'll see a grant contact list, which contains a brief explanation of each grant program. You'll also find a list of upcoming deadlines and some tips for writing your applications. So, to get started, the National Endowment for the Humanities is a federal agency founded in 1965 to support all areas of the humanities through project-based grants and fellowships using merit-based peer review. Some important parts of this definition. First, as a federal agency, the NEH uses taxpayer money and has a responsibility to make sure that money is spent wisely. We support projects and activities of national impact in all the U.S. states and territories. As a federal agency, we also support the humanities at the state level. As mandated by Congress, 40% of the agency's budget supports the state and jurisdictional humanities councils. These councils increase public awareness of, access to, and support for the humanities all across the United States. They play a critical role in supporting NEH's mission and goals at a local grassroots level. So, in addition to the grant programs we'll talk about today, I encourage you to see what opportunities your state or jurisdictional council has as well. All of our grant making is project-based. This means you need to define what you want to do. Some of the grants are for large projects, others for small ones, but all the grants are evaluated based on the project itself rather than the reputation of the applicant, either the individual or institution. You must prove yourself anew with each application. We use a merit-based peer review to evaluate all applications. Peer review is at the heart of our process. NEH tries to make that process as transparent as possible. We publish review criteria for each grant, and we ensure that reviewers stick to these criteria in their evaluations. We do maintain reviewers and applicants' privacy, but all applicants are entitled to feedback. So whether or not your application is funded, we encourage you to ask for reviewer comments. It's quite common for an application not to be successful the first time, but to be awarded on the second or third try. Many applicants find reviewers' feedbacks useful when revising their applications. Finally, the NEH makes grants in all areas of the humanities and welcomes inter and multidisciplinary work. Activities are addressed to different audiences, from the general public to school children and scholars. And NEH grants go to nonprofit institutions such as museums and archives, libraries, colleges, and universities, public television and radio stations, as well as individual scholars. Different groups might be eligible for different grants, but all projects are based in the humanities. We don't support the creative arts, that's NEA, and we don't support humanitarian work. With those caveats, we work with a wide definition of the humanities. The NEH founding legislation defines the humanities as including, but not limited to, quote, the study and interpretation of languages, both modern and classical, linguistics, literature, history, jurisprudence, philosophy, archaeology, comparative religion, ethics, the history, criticism, and theory of art, end quote. We also support projects in fields like anthropology and sociology, so long as they employ humanistic methods. So really, if you can make a case that your project is in the humanities, we encourage you to apply. And as we will be emphasizing throughout our presentation, you can always talk to a program officer if you have questions. In fact, if you remember just two things from today's presentations, I hope they are these. The first is that while NEH grants are competitive, one thing all awardees have in common is that they submitted the application. We fund applications from every state and all kinds of institutions, but you have to apply to be considered. Second is that the program officers are here to help. Most of us are also humanities scholars. Some of us have worked in libraries, archives, and universities. We know the impact that grant support can have and also how daunting the process can seem. The grants contact list we've provided can help you select the program officer most knowledgeable about the particular award you're interested in, and we want you to contact us. For most programs, we can even read a complete draft of your application. We published a draft deadline, which is usually a few weeks before the application deadline. And we are always happy to hear your ideas and help you find the grant program that's right for you. Even if you are just formulating an idea, please reach out to us and we are happy to speak with you. And so that's who we are as an agency. We really are here for you. We exist to support humanities through grants to individuals and to institutions. I'm going to begin to discuss some of the grant programs within the NEH that address the needs of libraries and archives specifically. Before I do so, let me just say that since its inception in 1965, NEH has seen the funding of the preservation of and access to the nation's cultural heritage as foundational to its mission. And it is understood that this mission must be carried out at multiple scales and in multiple ways. To give just one example, in 1979, NEH began funding the English Short Title Catalog, a database of all English language books published from 1473 to 1801. And in the same year, the Endowment established a program to support humanities programs in public libraries. A decade later, it launched a 20-year brittle books preservation plan to microfilm 3 million endangered volumes. Currently, the NEH has a special initiative we call A More Perfect Union, and it is designed to demonstrate and enhance the critical role the humanities play in our nation, while also supporting projects that will help Americans commemorate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence in 2026. The initiative builds on NEH's investment over the past 6 years in projects that catalog, preserve, explain, and promote American histories. As you might imagine, libraries and archival work are central here. So let me offer just one example. NEH inaugurated a partnership with the National Museum of African American History and Culture to invest $2.2 million in the History and Cultural Access Consortium, a 5-year pilot project to strengthen the libraries, archives, and museums of 5 historically Black colleges and universities, because we believe that the cultural heritage objects and the people who steward them are central to exploring, reflecting on, and telling the stories of our quest for a more just, inclusive, and sustainable society throughout our history. A More Perfect Union is a special encouragement throughout all of the grant programs that I will now be discussing. So please do keep it in the back of your minds as we go through the specifics of a number of award programs. So the NEH is comprised of 7 offices and divisions, and we will be touching on how almost all of them have programs for libraries and archives. As you may have guessed, it is the Division of Preservation and Access whose work most centers on libraries and archives, and so I will begin there. NEH recognizes that a substantial portion of the nation's cultural heritage and intellectual legacy is held in libraries, archives, and museums. These repositories have a great challenge to preserve diverse formats of materials that are threatened by factors inherent in their physical structure or by the environments in which they are housed, and to create a level of intellectual control sufficient to enable users to find and use the materials relevant to them. Increasingly, these humanities collections are being used to create the kind of web-based resources that NEH supports, such as encyclopedias, dictionaries, descriptive catalogs, and digital archives. Both the creators and users of these resources also need our support to develop digital tools to enhance access and promote integration of these materials. The Division of Preservation and Access grant programs specifically recognize that good stewardship of cultural heritage resources requires equal attention to both preservation and access. All of the division's programs focus on ensuring the long-term and wide availability of primary resources in the humanities. As you will see, the way that we define cultural heritage is, to put it succinctly, capacious. This list ranges from ethnographic artifacts to born digital materials. The Division of Preservation and Access is period and place agnostic, though, like all of NEH, it only funds projects that are based at US institutions, though such projects might have international partners. The Division of Preservation and Access's largest program is Humanities Collections and Reference Resources, which supports projects that provide an essential underpinning for scholarship, education, and public programming in the humanities. Thousands of libraries, archives, museums, and historical organizations across the country maintain important collections of books and manuscripts, photographs, sound recordings, and moving images, archaeological and ethnographic artifacts, art and material culture, and of course, digital objects. This program strengthens efforts to extend the life of such materials and make their intellectual content widely accessible, often through the use of digital technology. The Brooklyn Historical Society received an HCRR award to catalog, conserve, and digitize 1,600 flat and folded maps of Brooklyn from the Revolutionary era to 2015, concentrating on the early development of the city and eventually the borough of New York City in the 19th century. Also in the past year, Enslaved.org, a digital humanities project at Michigan State University, received an HCRR award to expand the data platform of Enslaved, Peoples of the Historical Slave Trade, through the addition of 10 digital collections, ranging from those held at small local institutions to those at large university-based special collections in the Mid-Atlantic region, the Carolinas, and Lower Mississippi. These additional data sets will increase the Enslaved.org linked open data platform to approximately 1.3 million records. Next, we move to the preservation assistance grants for smaller institutions. We recognize that in small organizations, implementing preservation needs happens incrementally. So this program is designed to cover a wide range of needs to encourage repeat applicants to support a combination of activities. At its heart, the point of this program is to enable small and mid-sized organizations to bring in outside experts in conservation and preservation to provide advice and build capacity. In the past year, Brimfield Public Library received a preservation assistance grant to care for their photographic negative collection. These photographic negatives depict life in Brimfield from the late 1800s to the early 1900s and document the changes to and growth of the community, including buildings and landscape that no longer exist. In addition to a local early American history collection, the town's library holds clippings and ephemera that trace the 50-year history of the Brimfield Flea Market, which, with over 1 million visitors 3 times a year, is the largest outdoor market in the United States. Note that they combine 3 tasks in one grant application. In another example, From the state of Massachusetts, the Forbes Library in Northampton received a preservation assistance grant to present a one-day workshop entitled Preservation Issues for Smaller Museums to representatives of 20 to 25 historical organizations in the spring of 2012. The host institutions contracted with the Northeast Documentation Conservation Center, who delivered the training workshop. Preservation and Access's Sustaining Cultural Heritage Collections program helps cultural institutions meet the complex needs of preserving large and diverse holdings of humanities materials for future generations by supporting sustainable conservation measures that mitigate deterioration, prolong the useful life of collections, and support institutional resilience. The ability to anticipate and respond to disasters resulting from natural or human activity. Cultural heritage institutions can accomplish the work of preservation most effectively through preventive conservation. Preventative conservation encompasses managing relative humidity, temperature, light, and pollutants in collection spaces, providing protective storage enclosures and systems for collections, and safeguarding collections from theft, fire, floods, and other disasters. The Boston Athenaeum received a planning award to monitor and assess their collections environments and HVAC system to identify more sustainable operations for its historic building, leading to improved care for the institution's holding of fine art, rare books, manuscripts, and furniture. Pepperdine University libraries received an implementation grant to upgrade their climate and security systems, including HVAC, lighting, fire suppression, shelving, and building envelope improvements in their special collections and university archives, which are used for research in topics ranging from the Church of Christ religious movement to the history of surfing. Division of Preservation and Access's Education and Training program funds the development of knowledge and skills among professionals responsible for preserving and establishing access to humanities collections. Awards are made to organizations that offer national, regional, or statewide education and training programs across the pedagogical landscape and at all stages of development, from early curriculum development to advanced implementation. This program is open to nonprofits and institutions of higher learning. Fellowships, mentorships, and residencies are included. The program encourages reaching underrepresented communities, as well as partnerships between academic and non-academic institutions. Recently, the Alaska Department of Education's Libraries, Archives, and Museums divisions received an award to support 3 5-month emergency preparedness training programs located across Alaska and targeting predominantly small rural heritage institutions. In the last 10 years, Alaska has experienced a succession of natural disasters that have included forest fires, flooding, avalanches, hurricane-class windstorms, and a 7.1 earthquake that struck Anchorage in 2018. These training programs will help cultural heritage organizations prepare or update their emergency disaster plans. This year, Wisconsin Library Services, in partnership with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Information School and tribal community partners, received an education and training award to support partnerships with 6 tribal institutions to advance digital preservation and curation learning opportunities, which would include 3 one-year fellowships at partner institutions, workshops, and discussions of 25 tribal cultural workers to develop a community of practice and service-based learning projects for 15 graduate students. The Division of Preservation and Access's Research and Development program supports projects that address major challenges in preserving or providing access to humanities collections and resources. These challenges include the need to find better ways to preserve materials of critical importance to the nation's cultural heritage, from fragile artifacts and manuscripts to analog recordings and digital assets subject to technological obsolescence, and to develop advanced modes of organizing, searching, discovering, and using such tools. With 2 tiers, this program supports projects at all stages of development, from early planning and standalone studies to advanced implementation. The Center for Research Libraries received a Tier 1 Research and Development Award to support the investigation of bibliographical data for approximately 20,000 humanities serial publications preserved on microfilm and in digital form to determine how such information could best be combined with the Print Archive Preservation Registry to facilitate acquisition and preservation decisions in libraries. Glass at Risk, Simple Tools for Detecting Unstable Glass in 19th Century Cultural Heritage Collections, is a Tier 2 Research and Development Award to create tools that assist in the identification of at-risk glass heritage items. It is a collaborative effort between the Library of Congress Preservation Research and Testing Division, the Library of Congress Music Division, the Vitreous State Laboratory at the Catholic University of America, and the George Washington University Medical Imaging and Analysis Lab. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tatiana, who's going to tell you about the Office of Challenge Programs.
Thank you so much, Molly. I am Tatiana Ausema. I am a Senior Program Officer in the Office of Challenge Programs, and I'm so glad to be joining all of you. Thank you so much for coming to this webinar. So I'm going to speak with you for the next couple minutes to give Molly a break and talk to you a little bit about the Office of Challenge Programs. The purpose of challenge grants is to strengthen the institutional base of the humanities by enabling physical infrastructure development and capacity building. So most of the programs Molly just spoke about in preservation and access are focused on the collections. This is going to be focused on your infrastructure. The awards aim to help institutions secure long-term support for core activities and expand efforts to preserve and create access to outstanding humanities materials. As Molly mentioned early on, all of NEH's programs are project-based, but these are going to be really big projects. So you'll be thinking about your buildings, long-term strategic planning, and alignment with your strategic plan. So fundraising is what sets challenge programs apart from most of the others at NEH and puts the challenge in challenge grants. All infrastructure and capacity building programs require the institution to raise third-party, non-federal gifts for the proposed projects. Projects can request up to $750,000 from NEH to be matched at either a 1-to-1, 3-to-1, or 4-to-1 ratio, depending on the institution type and the amount requested. And I'll talk a bit more about the matching aspect of this program in a minute, because that's usually what everybody needs to know about to think about applying for this program. So we offer one grant program, which is the Infrastructure and Capacity Building Challenge Grants, with 2 deadlines. The first one for this year just passed. It was May 18th for projects starting in March of 2022. And the next one that you want to be thinking about is going to be September 28th of 2021 for projects that are going to start as early as July 1st, 2022. You can apply to either deadline, but only one time per calendar year. Within the Infrastructure and Capacity Building Grant Program, we offer 2 distinct tracks, and each has its own notice of funding opportunity. The first track is for capital projects. Capital projects are the bricks and mortar part of Challenge and supports the design, purchase, construction, restoration, or renovation of facilities for humanities activities. This includes the purchase and installation of related movable and permanently fixed equipment for exhibiting, maintaining, monitoring, and protecting collections, whether they're on exhibit or in storage, and for critical building systems such as electrical, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, security, life safety, lighting, utilities, telecommunications, and energy management. So for libraries and archives, projects could include the purchase or construction of a new building, the renovation of your gallery space, your collection space, offices, meeting rooms. You could build out a humanities center within your library or archive, or renovation of an existing historic house, site, or landscape. As you'll hear from Molly, public programs is the division of NEH that supports the interpretive and analytical aspect of collections and exhibitions. So you can't request funding for any type of exhibition planning, educational materials, or outreach, but you could, however, submit an application to develop those meeting spaces, install educational materials, or renovate space. That could include fixtures, exhibition cases, shelving, and lighting. And for archives, that's going to be the heart of your mission. The second track that Challenge Programs offers is in digital infrastructure. Digital infrastructure supports the maintenance, modernization, and sustainability of existing digital projects and platforms. So for an archive, this might include upgrading software and hardware systems, integrating collection management software with digital assets, improving the user experience or upgrading a website, or digital preservation such as migrating data formats, changing to conform to preservation standards. This program does not support first digitization of collections. That would be in humanities collections and reference resources. This is going to be for existing digital projects. But eligible costs could include hardware, software, personnel, contractors, and the development of fundraising plans to support the project. This program wouldn't be appropriate for the development of a website, a first website or associated materials, but if you do need to migrate an existing website, change the underlying structure, develop search tools for the public, or ensure the long-term sustainability of a resource or database, this would be the program that you want to apply to. So as I mentioned before, all challenge recipients must raise non-federal third-party gifts to support their projects. This ratio, the matching ratio required to release funds depends on your institution type and the amount requested. There is no minimum amount that you can request from NEH, but the maximum for all projects in this program is $750,000. Historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, and two-year community colleges are eligible for a one-to-one match regardless of the amount requested from NEH. In this scenario, successful applicants must raise $1 in gifts for every $1 they're requesting from NEH. All other applicants must raise $3 for every $1 up to $500,000. And $4 for every $1 in requests from $500,001 up to $750,000. And you can use up to 10% of your total project budget to support fundraising. So if you need to hire fundraising staff, start a new campaign, you can use up to 10% of the budget for those activities. As you can see, infrastructure and capacity building challenge projects are complex, but they're still project-based. And they're usually part of a larger capital campaign, execution of a strategic plan, or other long-term planning. Since the program launched in 2017, approximately 40% of awards have been to libraries and archives for projects focusing on new construction, HVAC upgrades, installation of exhibits and storage equipment, and upgrades to digital asset management systems. Because of the complexity of project activities and the associated fundraising, we encourage you to reach out directly to our program officers as early as possible to discuss your application and to involve your whole team in planning and grant writing. This is especially true if you plan to apply to our upcoming September deadline. And please take Molly's comments about reaching out to us to heart. You're not required to contact staff prior to submitting an application, but please know that we're here to help, and we're happy to shine some light on what can be pretty confusing requirements. And so I'm going to talk just briefly about one project that the Challenge Office supported. This is the HBCU Library Alliance, and they were awarded a challenge grant of $365,000 to be matched one-to-one with $365,000 in non-federal third-party funds. This was building capacity for humanities special collections, is a 5-year project to enhance the long-term preservation and conservation of collections at member institutions. The HBCU Library Alliance will offer its member libraries a menu of preservation planning documents, collection surveys, treatment and rehousing options, and educational programs. And this will all be housed on a digital platform that can be accessed by all of the member organizations. By helping them to move forward in achieving collection care goals, the Alliance will assist libraries in building capacity for fundraising for special collection initiatives, documenting cultural heritage materials, increasing accessibility of special collection items, and promoting the humanities significance of their collections. So I am happy to answer any questions you may have in the chat while the webinar is going on, as well as the end of the presentation. But for now, I'm going to turn it back over to Molly, who will touch on a few more of NEH's divisions and offices.
Great, thank you so much, Tatiana. Since its founding in 2008, the Office of Digital Humanities, or ODH, funds projects experimenting with digital technologies to develop new methodologies for humanities research, teaching, learning, public engagement, and scholarly communications. ODH also funds teams studying digital culture from a humanistic perspective and humanists seeking to create digital platforms. Another major goal of ODH is to increase capacity within the humanities in applying digital methods for a broad range of humanities activities. All projects funded in this division are required to analyze their workflows and publish the results in white papers that are shared widely. This body of work contributes to the bibliography of digital humanities. So the flagship program of the Office of Digital Humanities are Digital Humanities Advancement Grants, which support innovative, experimental, and/or computationally challenging digital projects at different stages of their life cycles, from early startup phases through implementation and sustainability. Experimentation, reuse, and extensibility are valued in this program, leading to work that can scale to enhance scholarly research, teaching, and public programming in the humanities. The program also supports scholarship that examines the history, criticism, and philosophy of digital culture or technology and its impact on society. Of particular interest to libraries and archives, the Office of Digital Humanities has a partnership with the Institute of Museums and Library Sciences, IMLS, to support projects that advance digital infrastructure and initiatives in libraries and archives that further the IMLS mission to advance, support, and empower America's libraries, archives, museums, and related organizations. IMLS funding supports innovative collaborations between libraries and archive professionals, humanities professionals, and relevant public communities that advance the preservation of, access to, and public engagement with digital collections. The Digital Humanities Advancement Grant examples include a Level 2 award to the College of William and Mary for Transcribus and the Georgian Papers program, tabular formatted manuscripts. This project explores the application of the open sourced handwritten text recognition tool Transcribus to machine-driven transcription of handwritten materials of tabular formats, such as financial records and inventories, using materials from the Georgian Papers program. Another example of a Digital Humanities Advancement Grant and this time at Level 2, was to the University of Minnesota Libraries for mapping racial covenants in the United States, a technical toolkit. This project contributes to a growing body of humanities scholarship about post-World War II America that investigates the growth of racial segregation and inequality in American urban areas through examining and mapping racial covenants. The team experimented with developing a digital humanities workflow that combines optical character recognition, or OCR, for making digitized images of documents searchable, crowdsourcing using the free and NEH-funded Zooniverse platform, and geographic information science, or GIS, to map locations of racial covenants extracted from property deeds. The project team is using funds to open the project to other communities by generalizing the underlying code and technical workflows to broaden its capacity. Next, I'd like to move to a grant opportunity offered by the Division of Research that is of special interest to Library and Archives. The fellowship program at Independent Research Institutes, also known as FAPRI, is a re-granting program for institutions that provide residential fellowships in some of the nation's top independent research libraries and archives. Independent means independent from colleges or universities. The program currently funds 28 domestic and overseas centers who receive applications from a national rather than local or regional pool of candidates. Together, these centers award between 65 to 70 NEH-funded fellowships for the year. Fellowships range from 4 to 12 months and require full-time, continuous work at the center. Fellows have unique access to collections and resources and are embedded in vibrant intellectual communities. Some centers offer housing, though it is not a requirement of the program. Through FAPRI, NEH supports fellowships stipends at a rate of $5,000 per month. NEH also supports a portion of the cost of running review panels, up to $5,000 per year of the award, and a small percentage of other administrative costs as well. The award requires that funded centers closely adhere to NEH guidelines on a range of issues, including the guarantee of a fair and open selection process. By doing so, this program has over the years helped research centers become more democratic in terms of access and more national facing in scope. To be eligible, an organization must be a U.S. nonprofit institution with its own 501c3 status, a state or local government agency, or a federally recognized Native American tribal government, and must meet the following criteria. 1, the applicant organization must have established and maintained a fellowship program for at least 3 years immediately preceding the application deadline for the program. And 2, the applicant organization must be financed, governed, and administered independently of institutions of higher education. Institutions of higher education, foreign and for-profit entities, and individuals are not eligible to apply. This one really is only for independent libraries and archives. As I mentioned earlier, the NEH also operates at the state level through our Office of Federal-State Partnerships, which is the liaison between the NEH and the nonprofit network of state and local humanities councils. There are 56 nonprofit organizations in this network representing all 50 states and the 6 jurisdictions. State and jurisdictional humanities councils receive direct funding from NEH to support their work. Approximately 40% of NEH's annual appropriation funds the general operating support grants for each local council. The councils are the public humanities in action. Councils offer a wide array of grants and thought-provoking programming that make humanities ideas accessible to general public audiences, foster discussion, promote civic education, preserve cultural heritage, connect scholars and the public, and more. They have grant programs and subaward NEH and other funds to libraries and archives work that they do is tailored to the resources, demographic, interests, and concerns of the state or area they serve. We have included as a handout a list of contact information for each local council. We urge you to reach out and become involved in the work of your local council. Now that we've given you an overview of grant funding opportunities, along with some project examples, let's take a look at the application process. You may be wondering who is eligible to apply for an NEH grant. Most of our grant applications are US-based nonprofit institutions, like you, libraries and archives, and you must have a 501c3 status. The best source for information about the endowment's work is our website at NEH.gov. It has all of our grant programs, all of our deadlines, and a wealth of other information, including instructions on how to apply for a grant. You can see the link there at the top of the page. At the bottom of the page, you'll find an online database of all of our previous grants. Once you click on the link for grants, you will see this page. Here you'll be able to search all the grant programs, view awards made, and find additional information for first-time applicants as well as other resources. There is also a link here to sign up if you are potentially interested in serving as a peer reviewer for NEH. Once you identify the grant program you're interested in, you can click on a link for that program. For every grant program, there is a program page. Each page program includes the same kind of information, although the actual information varies from program to program. It will tell you the application deadline, the funding statistics for that program in recent years, and whom to contact if you have questions. The most important document on the program page is the Notice of Funding Opportunity, also known as the guidelines. These guidelines are long and a bit bureaucratic, but grant applicants should spend some time reading them. They will tell you who can and who cannot apply for a grant, what activities grant funds can and cannot support, what an application should include, and how applications will be evaluated. Also on this page is a link to recently funded projects to get a sense of the kinds of things that a program can support, and a link to sample applications, previously successful applications that you can use as inspiration and suggestion, though not necessarily as a model for your application. Applications for NEH grants, like many federal grants, are submitted through a web portal called grants.gov. You or your institution, depending on the type of grant for which you are applying, will need to register with grants.gov. We advise you to do this at least 4 to 6 weeks prior to applying. Grants.gov is a fairly straightforward system, but it is a good idea to spend some time getting familiar with it before you submit your application. We strongly urge that you register with grants.gov and apply early, as grants.gov can get overwhelmed in the last 5 minutes before a midnight deadline. Now that we've looked at the NEH website and where to find information for all of our grants, let's take a look at how your application will be assessed. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, every NEH grant application goes through a process of peer review. That means that each application is read by a committee of outside experts recruited by NEH staff. Reviewers represent different expertise in the humanities as appropriate to each NEH program. For example, humanities librarians will help to evaluate grants for libraries. Humanities educators will help to evaluate grants in the area of education, and so on. These reviewers evaluate the applications based on carefully defined criteria. They assign a rating and write comments. The NEH staff takes the committee recommendations to the National Council on the Humanities, a board of 26 humanities professionals appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. The chairperson of the NEH takes all these recommendations into account when making grant decisions. All this means that your application is being evaluated by people like you, people who know the humanities and understand the work you do. You should know that our reviewers take this process very seriously. So, what can you do to prepare a solid application? We have several suggestions on a handout, including these. Here are a variety of things to lay a good foundation for a successful grant application. First tip, begin early. The grant process is lengthy, and you may not get a grant the first time you apply, so you should apply early and often. Next, look at the notice of funding opportunity. As I mentioned, these include complete instructions on how to apply and other information. They vary a bit from program to program, so make sure you are using the ones for the program to which you're applying. Importantly, they also contain the review criteria, which you should closely consider and address as you write your application. Your audience for the proposal is humanists like yourself, and you will want to make the case for your project for this audience. Don't forget to pay attention to details such as proofreading and citations, since you don't want reviewers to be distracted by errors. And early on in the process, talk to a program officer. That's what we're here for. We are here to discuss project ideas, help you to find the right grant program, and so on. Many programs will also read draft proposals. Finally, before we conclude today, we wanted to mention some other opportunities for connecting with NEH. NEH has offered a student internship program in the past. For upcoming job opportunities, please visit the NEH website frequently for updates. Opportunities will be listed on USA Jobs, the federal government website for job postings. We also invite you to volunteer to be considered to serve as a peer reviewer. Here is the link once again, if you want to do that. You can follow NEH on social media at NEH.gov. We also publish a magazine, Humanities magazine, which features articles on NEH-supported projects and other humanities topics. You can access the magazine digitally on our website or sign up for email updates. Don't forget to find out what's taking place throughout your state or local humanities council and become involved in their work in the humanities. Finally, feel free to attend other upcoming virtual workshops between now and June 3rd. Workshops will be on a variety of topics, with 2 more to come after this one. And that brings our presentation to a conclusion. Today, we have provided an overview of NEH grant opportunities for libraries and archives, as well as where to find out more information and other topics. We hope that the information has been helpful, that you feel encouraged to apply, and that you will reach out to us for more information. Does anyone have any questions for us?
If you have any questions, please insert them in the Q&A feed, and we'll try to address as many as we can. One question that we've already addressed in writing, but I think it would be good to talk about is someone has asked, public libraries often do not have 501c3 status. How do they apply?
Well, they need to obtain 501(c)(3) status. It really is a prerequisite for to be able to apply, to be able to register on grants.gov. Tatiana, is there anything you want to add there?
Sure. Oftentimes we also see public libraries applying through the local municipal government because the municipal government is an eligible applicant. So depending on how your library is structured, sometimes we also see applications come in through Friends of the Library if your library has a fundraising arm that has 501c3 status.
Thank you so much. Another question is, if someone is unsure which program that their project fits under, what should they do?
Well, that's a great question. The first thing that they should probably do is visit the website and see, sort of try to narrow it down and maybe sort of identify a division. So does it seem like a preservation and access project? Does it seem, are they trying to fundraise? Is it challenge? And then each office has an email associated with it, and they can start there. And then from there, they'll be contacted with a program officer who will be happy to have a meeting with them. And then at that time, learn more about the project. And we all have familiarity with the other programs, those that we don't directly work on, those that are outside of our division. And so we will be able to put you in contact with the program officer who would be able to assist you most directly with that program. So essentially, reaching out is the best thing to do, first at the division level, and then from there, as I say, we will sort of funnel you into the right direction. And within 1 or 2 meetings with a program officer, you should very well know which grant program makes the most sense for you.
Great. We have another question about whether we would fund the purchasing of a piece of equipment, like a good scanner for a small college's special collection.
Yes, if the it's possible, absolutely, if the digitization is part of a larger project that increases the access to the collection. So digitization, so scanning alone, we don't usually fund, but scanning that's part of a cataloging project or another kind of indexing or sort of making materials accessible online is something we fund all the time, and sometimes hardware is a part of that. Large scale hardware purchases often come through challenge programs, and the digital infrastructure is really the best place to look if it's a large scale project like that. But a single scanner is more likely something that would be funded through Humanities Collections and Reference Resources in the Division of Preservation and Access. But as I say, scanning alone, we don't fund. It's scanning that's a part of a larger sort of apparatus that to make a collection accessible.
Great. Here's a question for Tatiana that I know that we frequently get. So with regards to matching funds, would support from an organization like Friends of the Library be applicable? So we always get questions about which matching funds are eligible.
Yeah, so the answer is almost always it depends, because as many of you listening probably know, there's lots of different ways that libraries, cities, and friends of the libraries are usually established. But in general, if gifts are from third-party sources, so members of the general public or foundations, and if they're for the purposes of the project, rather than just general gifts to the library, they're generally eligible for to qualify for the match. But we do like to look, if you apply or are interested in applying and want to have a conversation, we usually like to see how that relationship is set up. There's also a document, Administration of Challenge Grants, that's on the NEH website that if you want to dig into, it's a bit of dry reading, so pour yourself a cup of coffee first, but you can dig into the Administration of Challenge Grants manual that provides some guidance. But again, program officers are happy to help you navigate some of those questions.
I think the answer to a lot of questions is contact a program officer, because they really are here to help at every stage of the process. We've gotten another question, which is, would there be a grant to help build a small amphitheater through this organization? So I'm guessing, if anything, it would be challenge.
Yeah, I'll take that one since I'm already on mic. Yes, so challenge programs would be the organization, or the division to reach out to for any sort of construction, and an amphitheater. As long as it was going to be used, you'd have to justify the humanities purpose of that. So if it's used for town concerts and fine arts, it would likely not be eligible. But if it's used for humanities programming, talking about the history of music, for lecture series, whatever, then that would potentially be eligible in challenge programs.
Great. Someone else has a collection of rare historical photos that they're interested in digitizing and making available online. Which program would that best fit under?
Most likely that's a Humanities Collections and Reference Resources. Again, just 2 caveats there is that it is institution based, so those collections need to be in the hands of an institution, a 501(c)(3) or a library, a state or local library. So an individual can't apply to digitize their own collection. I just want to make sure that that's clear. And then the other thing to say as well, just as I was saying earlier, the scanning alone is not really competitive. It's the scanning that's part of a larger digitization project that includes metadata and metadata created using national standards that gets funded through this program. Because again, it's not just about the preservation through digitization, but it's very much about the access through digitization. So, but that would be Humanities Collections and Reference Resources.
But if someone has very specific details they'd like to hash out, you would recommend that they email the Division of Preservation and Access to talk it through with the program officer?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ellen, for saying that. And that's preservation@NEH.gov.
Wonderful. I'm not seeing any additional questions right now. We'll give you a chance to think of things while we wrap things up. But this presentation will be available on NEH's website and YouTube page beginning next week, along with all the other presentations from this series. You can also find the handouts on the link that you used to get here in the first place, and it's also available as an announcement early on in the live event Q&A. And I'm not seeing any additional questions. So thank you so much to Molly and Tatiana for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.